A federal judge is delaying the timeline for tariff refunds. It's a key win for the Trump administration as it tries to navigate the ramifications of that landmark Supreme Court case, which struck down many of the president's tariffs. Here to break down everything we know on this decision is the Hill's courts and legal reporter, Zach Schoenfeld. Zach, thanks so much for joining us. The judge had originally said that he wanted immediate action on the refunds, but now appears to be softening the timeline. Why is that, and what does his new order say?
Hey, Judy, this is really a shift here from the judge after there was originally a hearing last week, as you mentioned, where the judge really wanted to move full steam ahead, saying that this refund process shouldn't be complicated. But then the Trump administration really was expressing concerns that they wouldn't be able to comply. They emphasized the fact that we're talking about tens of millions of tariff entries that need to be looked at here. And so they've said that they're in the process of actually standing up an electronic system to help manage this process and to go through those entries. And they say that that's going to take time. They say they've asked actually specifically for up to 45 days to stand up that system. So a timeline that would get things going around mid to late April or so. And now following that, the judge has walked back some of these orders to immediately comply. He wants an update from the government on their progress by Thursday, but still a shift here, seemingly now a big win for the Trump administration, giving them a little bit more breathing room to figure out some of the processes to get these refunds out.
How much money does the Trump administration have to refund, and how many companies would be involved in that process?
Well, Judy, actually, just here in the last few days, we've finally gotten an accurate picture of this data after it was really just estimates up until this point. So according to this new data from customs officials, that $166 billion were paid by importers over the last year in these tariffs that have now been struck down by the Supreme Court. So $166 billion in total. That comes from more than 330,000 importers who have been paying these tariffs. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, we're talking about more than 50 million different tariff entries. So you can just see by some of the numbers here that even though there is some precedence here where there have been tariffs that have been refunded before, I mean, just the sheer scale that we're talking about, where the government is facing the prospect of having to refund nearly $200 billion, is quite something, especially when you even start thinking about that interest is going to have to be applied to all of this.
That's a whole lot of cash. While the Trump administration's act is pushing to delay these refunds as long as possible, the judge brought up a key point related to the interest on those refunds, which could make the total cost go up even more. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is something that we've known was going to be a thing as this tariff case was moving along, that if we got to this moment where the Supreme Court has struck down the tariffs and they need to be refunded, the law says that refunds also needs to include interest. So to be clear, I've been listening into these court hearings, and this has been a position that the Trump administration itself has even acknowledged, that these refunds are going to have interest payments. I don't have the specific number of how much that is going to amount to, but if you just start thinking about the math here, $166 billion in payments, no matter what exact interest rate gets applied, you're talking about billions of dollars in additional costs. And of course, that's a number that is only continuing to grow by the day and each and every day that these tariffs are not refunded as this process grows. So like I said, $166 billion is what was actually paid, but that number is just going to continue to grow as we get into the spring here until that money actually changes hands.
Zach, what should we be keeping an eye on in the coming days, the coming weeks as this case develops?
I'd say keep an eye out for two different fronts here. The first is specifically here on refunds, and that is watch to see what companies and lawyers are really become the key players here as they jostle to be the ones to lead this fight. Really, in the last week, there has actually been a Nashville-based filtration company. It's called Atmos. That has emerged all of a sudden as the lead company in this refund fight. This is a different company than the ones at the Supreme Court. And you actually now have the companies that were at the Supreme Court now going back down to this trade court and urging them to let them in on the action too, and to be part of these negotiations and proceedings. Unclear if they're going to be allowed to do so. So far, there has been no sign that they will, but still, we're seeing some signs actually of a bit of, like I said, jostling among the attorneys here. So that's one thing to watch. And then something else on just a bit of a different front here is we've, of course, been talking about these tariffs that were struck down by the Supreme Court. The president still moving ahead on his new round of global tariffs, which he says are still legal following that Supreme Court decision. But just in the last few days, we have begun to see new lawsuits over those tariffs as well. A group of blue states has newly filed a lawsuit challenging those. So no word yet from the courts on a ruling yet in that case. It's just getting underway. But in the next few weeks, that's going to be one to watch too, Judy.
Zach Schoenfeld, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.